Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to help you lead more confidently and make a bigger difference, both professionally and personally. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's free weekly e-newsletter, Unleashing Your Remarkable Potential, which is full of articles and resources to help you become a more confident and successful leader. Sign up by going to remarkablepodcast.com/newsletter. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Welcome to Live with Kevin and Eastern Time, the time zone in which I live. It's noon, and I'm so glad that you're here on this sunny day in Indianapolis on the 8th day of March. So glad that you're here. Some of you, though, aren't with me live. You are with us later. And so let me just dive in. Can I? Prosperous. How does that word strike you? Does that feel like something for someone else or for some time in the future? Today, we're going to talk about a new way to think about being prosperous and how to become more prosperous now and forever into the future. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast live. If you're not live, it's not March the 8th, but either way, we're glad that you're here, and you can get all future live episodes and therefore interact with us and see these episodes sooner by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. Today's episode is brought to you by our new book, The Long Distance Teammate. If you work remotely and want to be more effective, more productive, more engaged, and more connected, this book will help you get there, because there's a big difference between working from home and being an engaged and effective remote teammate. You can learn more and order your copy today at longdistanceteammate.com. But you didn't really come to hear that. You came to meet our guest. His name is Larry Olsen. Now you can see him here. Now you see him. Now you don't. And let me tell you a little bit about Larry before we dive in, shall we? Larry is an international speaker, author, podcast host, and executive coach. He has years of experience working with Fortune 50 companies, championship teams, and entrepreneurs on establishing their vision and sense of purpose. Larry is passionate about helping individuals and providing teams quick, actionable guidance on how to break ingrained and ineffective habits that they might not even know were holding them back. His best-selling book, Get a Vision and Live It, right here's the latest copy, is helping people learn how to change their attitudes to align with their visions. Larry, welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, sir.
Well, Kevin, thank you. It's a very much a pleasure to be on your show. I thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. I was telling you before we went live, I've been enjoying the book and looking forward to talking about that. But before we get into the book, tell me about your journey. You know, how did you come to do the work that you're doing? What led you there?
I've been in this business most of my life, and my sister, when she came into life, was labeled mentally delayed. They called it something a little more critical than that, but it caused me, having her 3 years older than myself, to look at things a little differently. And then later through life, I found myself managing a chain of restaurants in Seattle, Washington. I'd never been in the restaurant business, so why not start as director of operations, right?
Sure. Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. And I think that was all just because of the relationship I'd built with the owner of the restaurant. Anyway, I found myself after, I think it was 6 months, being asked to leave. And it's the first time in my life that's ever happened. And when I checked on it, I was the 5th director of operations, this gentleman had in the last 6 years. So research would have been a great idea at the time.
That's what they call a trend, Larry.
You think?
That's what they call a trend.
So I was attempting to find work, and nothing that I could find would even resolve some of the challenges I was facing at the time. I had recently been married divorced about a year before that. And so the clock was ticking because I was running out of funds. And then I recognized that I was doing exactly the opposite what I needed to be doing to become prosperous. I was focusing on the challenge. And, when you do that, you create a little bit of a pity party, you kind of tuck into a fetal position. You don't want to get up. It's just going to be another bad experience. And then I recognized this is exactly what I have been teaching and learning my entire life. And that is, you get what you think about. And it's nothing new, but most of us do not become aware of it. We don't even know we're doing it. And what's so fascinating about our brain is it then receives the information to prove to us we're right. And that's the biggest challenge we face. Most of us would rather be right than successful, even though we would never select that. So
now, I'm not going to pick it, but that's what ends up happening. I want to stop you just for a second, Larry, and say, for all of you that are with us live, if you have a comment, you have a question, feel free to share that. We'd love to have it. I have questions, but so do you. And if you've got them, we want yours as well. So you ended up saying, hey, I don't like where I'm at. No, I've got to do something different.
You bet. And why don't I go with my strengths? And
what a novel idea, Larry.
Go figure. And I had been involved in neuroscience most of my life and had recognized there was a nice correlation between neuroscience and psychology. In other words, how can I take the science of how I operate and naturally accomplish things and turn that into a higher level of accomplishment? And that's where the prosperity comes into, and the company of Peroni, which is an achievement acceleration organization. So I decided I'm going to create my own business. And this was May of 95. And this was April of 95. And as soon as I decided that, I got a phone call. And I understand life enough to recognize that this was a bit of an anomaly, but it was positive. And it was an individual that said, I hear you have your own company. Now, I had just
starting yesterday, right?
Yes. And my daughter happened to be in the room. And I said, yes, I have a company. And so I wasn't stretching the truth a bit, but he said, a friend of mine who's very successful in business said, you were the reason behind his success. And he goes, how would I get together with you? And he goes, but I don't know if we need you. We got a pretty great team already. And I said, well, let me ask you this. And this was the owner of a very large organization. And I said, when you were growing up in your neighborhood and you were picking teams, I'll bet you were the captain. And he goes, well, how'd you know? So go figure, right? Another go figure. That's three.
Not that hard.
And so I said, so when you're picking players, I said, how'd those kids feel that were picked first? And he said, well, I think they felt great. And I go, how about the ones that were picked last? And Kevin, there was a pause over the phone. And he said, how do I get you into my company? And
okay. Anyone who's here who is an entrepreneur, anyone who's here who is a coach, anyone who's here that's a consultant, anyone who's here who wants to start a business, that is a great story. That's a great question.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking that. And then this May is 26 years later.
I'm just a couple of years ahead of you.
But are you?
About the same length. Yeah. Awesome. I remember I left a large company to start a company. And I remember several months, Larry, after I was out and doing my own thing. And we were somewhere and someone says, oh, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a consultant. And just this quick, he said, how long have you been looking for a job? And I said, listen, you're not a consultant unless you have a client. And I have clients. So there you go.
Yes. How true. How true. That's right.
Otherwise, you're just looking for a job. So anything else? I put this up here about performance-driven neurology. You sort of got in there. I sort of slid that up here. Anything else you want to say about that?
Well, the greatest challenge we all face is our own mind. And what I mean by that is that we record information. If it wasn't for our amygdala, who knows where we'd be right now, because it takes care of all of the automatic systems going on in our brain, along with the reticular activating system, which is another great story. But the amygdala, remember, is all about fight, flight, freeze. And it handles stress, which most of us are under pretty much 24/7 at some level or another. And every time we have an experience, it records it neurologically because it operates pretty much like this. Have I ever seen anything like this before? What's this possibly leading me towards? And then it makes a decision But 95 times out of 100, it makes a decision based on the past, not what's possible for us. And when we begin to recognize the science of how our brain operates, we begin to realize that I've been making my decisions based off the past. No wonder growth is not accelerating.
And we can't change the past. We can change what we think about the past, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the whole idea behind it is if I make my decisions based off the past, how do I change my past? Well, we can't go back in time, but we can deal right now with how do I want my reality to be? I want to be enjoying this podcast with you right now, Kevin. And I want to make sure you're enjoying yourself as well. And
he's not saying everybody that he is. He's saying he wants to. Just saying.
Well, as a matter of fact, I am. Thank you for catching that. That's great. But again, that's what people, when they think, they're generally processing, and processing occurs again at a pace that we can't even comprehend. The brain works so fast, it takes us a half a second to a second and a half to realize we already made our mind up. So all we're doing is being reactionary. And when you take that into leadership, Kevin, ask me this, do you know any leaders who have some attitudes about the people that work for them?
Only every single one.
It's natural because they get to know their people, and that's what stifles performance. Because what if they get to know somebody who made a mistake? What if they get to know somebody who was late? What if they get to know somebody who didn't finish the report on time? What if they get to know them that way? Guess what they have a tendency to do? They have a tendency to lead that way. Now, how do I know that? Once my sister was labeled, people started treating her that way. The family started treating her that way. I started treating her that way. And unfortunately, we didn't have this kind of education. So it went on for most of her life. By the time I became cognizant of this, there was a lot of ingrained mindset that she had. And one time she looked me in the eye and she said, "I'm different, aren't I?" And I said, "And your difference is magnificent, honey. They don't make anybody like you. You were amazing." And, some of it was kind of, you've got to catch people at the right time because most people are not ready to receive information. Yeah. And that is so important for leaders to recognize.
The teachable moment. I want to go back to something that you said a second ago and bring it into present day. And I opened sort of fumbling by saying that it's March the 8th when we're doing this, but people that get this on the podcast, end of April at the earliest, and who knows when people are going to watch this. But here's the thing. Okay. The world is different than it was a year ago, meaning that leaders are often, maybe always now, leading their teams remotely. And the longer we go, the more likely they've hired people remotely. I know all about this. I've done it. And here's the thing. Not only is everything you said right, Larry, about how I'm labeling and how I'm choosing to think about that person, but now I have fewer data points. And so it becomes, if it's possible, even more important. Because now we're operating with fewer, like when we were in the office down the hall, like I saw someone, a bunch of times a day. Now I might never see them, but I see them on Zoom, and I see them on Zoom 3 times a week. And I talk to them twice more, and I see them 5 times on times on Slack. And so that just is an additive effect to what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you recognize that all of us are looking out of our own eyes, we are all trying to make sense of this world that we're living in. And we get these images because all the brain does is all it gets is information. And then based on our experiences and our knowledge, we then interpret that information. That's why if someone's late, we know that the next time they arrive, the chances are they're going to be late. When they are on time, what do people do? They get sarcastic. Now, wait a minute. You just witnessed punctuality. The same information you received when they were late, now you got what you wanted, but the brain can't accept it because it's already made its mind up.
Yeah.
And so then, therefore, I act accordingly. So when you take this medium that we're in now, where it's easy for you and I to kind of see each other.
Yep.
But most people think body language and tone of voice is about 90%, and the words we use are about 10. Well, some of the studies that have been done, they talk about the fact that every word is as powerful as every emotion, sound, and experience that we have. And if you're really into the science behind this, how many experiences do we have? How much information does the brain receive? In just that quick first impression, we receive over 250,000 messages. The average individual beats up about 100 words to death a day, same 100 words, unless they're taking a vocabulary class and they go, oh, promiscuous. I think I'll incorporate that today. So guess which one wins out every time? Now, when you dilute that by having all these tiny little squares in front of you, and you only can hold so many on your screen without being able to identify any of them, what happened to all of that information?
Yep.
But now we have to make some judgments, don't we? Oh, it's Mary. I know Mary. Oh, there's Bob again. He doesn't seem like he's paying attention. What's Sally doing on the pillow? And what ends up happening is that affects our presentation. That affects our intent. It affects our ability to get those people hanging on our every word. And if they're not going to do that, why are we doing this meeting to begin with?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right?
So absolutely. I knew, Larry, that when I read the book, and when my first impression, when we first started chatting before we went live, that this could be a very long conversation. And so people who are paying attention will note that I opened with a whole tease, and we haven't even gotten there yet. So I got to get there because the subtitle of the book is Becoming Prosperous Now for Life. So here's the question, everybody. That was my whole tease, was about prosperity. Like, Kevin, are you ever going to get there? Here it is. So what is prosperity?
Prosperity is not financial independence. That's a byproduct. Prosperity is not health. That's a byproduct. Prosperity is not having great friends. That's a byproduct. So what is the definition of prosperity? The definition of prosperity is if you can say yes to this next question. And this question is, are you having the time of your life right now? Now, some people say, God, I'm listening to Kevin and Larry. Can you pick another time?
How can I possibly? Can you give me a different now than this?
Are you crazy? Or I'm at work, or I'm driving to get groceries, and that's the whole deal. That's the woulda, coulda, once as soon as. That's where most people live and don't even know it, that somehow it's going to take place at another time. Those that are in the 7-8% who are really saying, well, of course, Larry, everybody knows that. That's the key in leadership. Not everybody's aware of that. So when I said, I'm going to start my own business, I had to take it to another point and say I have my own business, because then my brain acts differently. My antenna now dials into a different channel than it was on before, which was scarcity, not prosperity and abundance. And it's not going to happen instantaneously, because you're making a huge shift from an older version of self. And this is what they mean by showing up a newer version. A version that's actually ready for the moment has to offer, instead of, I've seen that before. Yeah, I know what Larry.
And the minute that I see that before is one step from disengagement, from cynicism.
You bet.
Right.
You bet. And that whole disengaged element, we know with the Gallup studies and everything else that we've done, we recognize it's just it's criminal inside an organization that you're compensating people who would rather be someplace else.
Yeah. And here's the thing. And, you and I'm confident we're on the same wavelength. And that is that engagement isn't something we do to people. It's something people choose.
Absolutely.
They've got to choose it themselves. Now, as leaders, there's things we can do to improve the chances, to make it easier for them to make that choice.
Absolutely.
But it's not something that we do to people.
No. Leaders need to create an environment where their people can be successful. I mean, let's keep it real simple. That's their only job. And then they need to recognize, and part of my education is having everybody understand how our brain processes information, how we make decisions, so we have a common language within the organization. And then when you create the purpose and vision, now I don't have to say, when I see you out around or you just ripped somebody in front of someone, I'll go up and say, hey, Kev, excuse me for calling
That's
you
okay.
Kev. Kevin, that guy just left that meeting with his tail between his legs. One of our values is respect. What happened? And then I get to hear your story. And then while you're telling your story, you're going, I guess that wasn't very respectful, was it? I don't know. What do you think? No, I don't think it was. And that's where real change takes place, is when the individual has the aha moment, not when you've tried to create the aha moment. One of my quotes is, you can't tell anyone into high performance. I mean, can you? It's just what you were saying. And so here's what we do as leaders. We create opportunities for people to be the best they can possibly be. That's what we do. And it's learned, and it's not difficult. It's actually really easy.
So we are talking with Larry Olsen, the author of Get a Vision and Live It, Becoming Prosperous Now for Life third edition. Although, Larry, it needs to say that on here. That'd be awesome, because everyone who says, not only need to write a book, but he wrote it 3 times. I'm serious.
I love that.
To say third edition on here. So anyway,
and by the way, you will not be able to get that on Amazon. I have no challenges with Amazon, but you go to the website, because I'm driving people to the website.
I'm going to give people that right now, and we'll give you a chance to say that again. But I'm going to put that right here on the bottom. If people are watching, say it for me. I can spell it, but I can't.
Aperneo.
Aperneo.com, Aperneo.com.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So here's the thing, Larry. Okay. We've talked about this a little bit. We've talked about the leader's role, and I want to come back to that. But there's something else. The other big word in the title of the book is vision, and we haven't really talked about that yet.
Okay.
Either. So, there are folks here as leaders say, okay, well, talk about vision statements. There's a lot of baggage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially around the second words, vision statement.
Sure.
A lot of cynicism there.
Amen.
Not from everybody, but from many. Talk about that. Help us as leaders do 2 things. Think about these 2 things in a new frame, in a positive frame, both for ourselves and for our teams.
Okay. All right. I think they feel a little better about the term goal. And I want you to think about a goal is to have a party at your house on Saturday night. And then when I ask you, who are you going to invite? And then, well, I'm not sure yet. We're going to invite the people you don't like? No, we're going to invite the people we do. And okay. And how many are you going to invite? Well, my barbecue, has this many burners. So I think we're going to, and as they start to talk about that, then I ask them, well, how are you going to feel at that party? Oh, we're going to have a great time. Wait till I got a cocktail it's just dynamite. What is starting to happen now is they are getting a vision, aren't they? They're starting to taste it, touch it, feel it, smell it, emotionalize it, and they own it. Now there's a lot of goals that they have to set and accomplish in order to fulfill that. A vision is simply something greater than self. And it's unfortunate that it gets such a bad rap, because most people who talk about it don't understand it, don't recognize that the goal isn't what gets you up in the morning. It's what happens after you accomplish the goal that gets you up in the morning. The goal is a task sometimes. But when I accomplish that, and it's the old adage, how many people went ahead and went to college just to get the certificate? It wasn't the certificate. It was did you graduate? Yes, I did. I accomplished that. Probably one of the greatest boosters in all of our lives is a sense of accomplishment. That's why when that great book was written about making your bed, right? That was such a simple premise about, if I make my bed in the morning, when I get home at night, I can at least go, yo, you made your bed. Because more often than not, without vision and without owning your vision now, which means everything you're doing is relative to, but here's the key. You're not only acting like it now, you're feeling like it now, you're living it now, which you know how to do because you're doing all that with your past now. So if you're so darn good doing it with your past now, what if you did it with the future outcomes you want, acting as if now?
Yeah, that phrase "as if," that you want to accelerate your ability to reach goals. That's it.
Yeah. With people that are trying to lose weight, I go, how much you want to weigh? And they go, well, I'm not sure. And I go, well, that's a bit of a challenge right now.
Yeah, we got a problem.
Let's figure that out. And if they go, if they're 250 and they want to weigh 185, and I said, well, this is real simple. And they go, well, what's that? Which diet book? No, it's not about a diet book. It's not about the exercise. Those are all offshoots of when you start behaving like 186, all the rest of it will take care of itself.
I have to tell a quick story.
Okay.
So there used to be this TV show called The Biggest Loser.
Right.
And I'm not a super big fan of reality TV, but I was traveling a lot then before the pandemic. And my wife liked the show. And if I was home and I wanted to spend time with my wife, then I'm going to watch The Biggest Loser. So I started watching, like, whatever. And then I had the epiphany. Like, this whole show is about change. So here's what I did, Larry. The next year, the start of the next season, I watched the opening episode where they tell everybody's backstories. You get to know all the people. And I would write 5 names down out of the 30 people or whatever. And I said, 3 of these 5 are going to be the winners. I did it 4 seasons in a row. Why? Because I was listening to their mindset and I was listening to their reason why. It wasn't about anything else. Like, if someone says, I want to weigh whatever number so that I can that I can play with my grandkids on the floor, they got a shot.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
Yes.
If this person says, listen, I want to be able to, I'm not sure I'll be able to be alive to walk my daughter down the aisle. I'm like, they got a shot, because it's not about the pounds.
Yeah. And you know what you just brought up, which we should spend a second on, is we all know the power of motivation. It gets us up in the morning, causes us to take action. But how are you motivating yourself? And this is where prosperity comes into play and achievement acceleration. There's 2 types, and this you're very familiar with this. 95% of corporations motivate from fear. Now, even in our high tech, even with all of the things that are available to us, all of the new learnings, if you will, that were available in the 60s, 70s, 30s, 40s as well. But, let's not go there. Let's take a look at it now. You would think that's ludicrous. Everybody knows if you're motivating from fear, you don't get the performance. But they don't know what's really going on when we talk about fear. Fear is simply the loss of something. So if you're getting up in the morning because you don't want the company to lose respect for you by not making the meeting, you're motivating by fear. Yeah. And interesting, all companies compare themselves against each other, and they're all motivating the same way. So when you have to, or do you want to? And that's the huge difference to make that switch in a company. So they're motivating from value, not through fear. And that means everything that's been going on in the organization is rethought now. It doesn't become difficult. It's just rethought. So I'm doing things because I want to. I see the reason behind it. And if you can't come up with a greater reason behind it to get you motivated, then I won't die, because that's very negative, then don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. You don't have to do anything. Well, you don't even have to pay your taxes. Well, if I pay my taxes, I'll go to jail. That's right. Do you want to go to jail? No, I kind of like the freedom I have. Then shut up and pay your taxes. I mean, it's all a choice. And that again, but to choice relative to what? And that's where we as a human species have all the control in the world. Because now whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, it's not the circumstance that creates how we feel. It's what we do about the circumstance. And more importantly, how we think about it. And with vision, voila, it gives us an opportunity to learn and be educated.
Your point, choice relative, is so important, because people say, I don't have any choice. Well, yeah, you do. Well, I don't want to lose my job. Well, then you have a choice, right? Like, that's so important, that choice relative to, and people don't always see that. And we as leaders, as coaches, as friends, can help people frame it that way, because that becomes empowering once we realize that we actually do have choice. So Larry, there's so much we could talk about.
Oh, we could.
I'm confident one way or another we're going to do this again. Maybe not on this podcast, but one way or another we're going to do this again. But I have a couple things I have to ask.
Okay.
Because I have no choice, Larry.
All right.
So I have. There's three things I choose to ask because I choose to ask everybody. And the first one of those is, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? My wife and I have been doing a lot of hiking. We're fortunate to be very close to the mountains, and there's thousands and thousands of miles to hike around here, and it's 5 minutes away. And that's been great in getting great boots and doing all of the things necessary to accommodate myself. One of the exciting things, we take our dog, and I just got this great cup with the drink, you pop open and pour it instead of losing all that water. So those types, it used to be golf, but there's reinventing the business, if you will, with what's happened with the pandemic. And I'm sure a lot of people can appreciate that and are in the process or have completed it themselves. So those are, kind of the two things that I really enjoy doing.
Perfect. And so what are you reading these days? This is a question I love to ask smart people. I've been doing it my whole life. And so what are you reading these days? Or what's something you read recently?
Yeah, I'm rereading Og Mandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World. I came upon it in the early 70s, and it was just so natural and so easy to understand and so relevant relative to how important stories are to communicating with one another, and the importance of vision again. What
a master. I loved Og. And if you're watching, listening, and never read Og Mandino, pick up The Greatest Salesman in the World, pick up The Greatest Miracle in the World. The Greatest Miracle in the World talks a lot about this idea of choice.
Absolutely.
We started to land the plane on, and man, it is hard to get better.
And it touches upon spirituality, but doesn't touch upon theology. And there had to be something magical when that phone rang. And I recognized, this is my spirituality, I recognized that I didn't create my neurons. I didn't create the ability to divide a cell. All of that was done for me. But the gift I got was this thing called life. And now I have all of this incorporated into one entity that we all share together. And the more that we value that in each other, the more we see what we like about one another. And then when we see something we don't like, we educate and we help, because we all want to be better, and nobody goes out of their way to make a mistake on purpose. It's just attempting to, and this is one of the number one reasons why people do what they do. And it's also the number one fear of mankind, and it's rejection. What's that mean? We need to be accepted. If we weren't in tribes and we weren't in groups, we couldn't protect ourselves. As Simon Sinek gets into in why and creating those safe zones, he's really popularized that. It's been around forever. And, to all of you out there, and I just recognize that it's not somewhere else. It's right here, right now. And you are exactly where you need to be to make wonderful things happen. And sometimes, more often than not, we need a guide. We need somebody to point it out, because left alone, we keep reacting and understanding things based on the time and information we have. So,
absolutely. So, Larry, before we go, what do you want people to know? Where do we want to point people? How can they connect with you, et cetera?
All right. To keep it real simple, let's just go to apernio.com. You can find all kinds of resources and areas there to get more education or more information. I'm very available to anyone that wants to see whether or not there's a fit within their organization, or just wants to have a read that is easy and commonsensical. So there it is right there.
Apernio.com. The book is Get a Vision and Live It, Becoming Prosperous Now for Life. Larry Olsen, everybody. So before we go, I have a question for all of you. I'm done asking Larry. He needs a break. Here's a question for all of you. Now what? What are you going to do as a result of this? What action will you take? If you take no action here, sort of what was the point? You could probably find better entertainment than Larry and I.
It was like a ride at Disney, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was really cool. Well, what'd you do about it? Well, is there another one coming up?
Yeah, exactly. Here's the thing. What action will you take? Maybe you got some idea. Maybe you got a new frame to think about prosperity. Maybe you got some new thoughts about self-talk. Maybe you got some new thoughts about fight, flight, freeze, maybe whatever it was that you got, what action will you take because of what you got from the brilliance that is Larry Olsen? And if you do that, then great things will come from this for you today, because as Larry said, everything is there for you. It's just a matter of how we choose to move forward. And so let me thank you all for joining us, whether it was live or whether it was later. We hope that you'll be back next week, because we're here every week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kevin.